Snow was falling thick over the silent streets of Boston. The shop windows gleamed with Christmas lights, but for Claire Thompson, those lights were only distant reminders of a time when she still believed in miracles. Now, every flake that landed on her torn coat seemed to mock her hunger and loneliness. She clutched a worn little blanket to her chest, the last trace of her son, Oliver, taken months earlier by social workers after she'd lost her apartment. Just one more day, my love. Mommy will find a way, she whispered through frozen tears. Claire went from door to door, asking for work, food, anything. Most people didn't even open. Others looked, pitied, and closed the door again, pity disguised as disgust. At the end of the street stood a mansion, rising like a castle amid the storm, tall windows, iron gates, and a discreet plaque with the name Ward. She hesitated. She knew who lived there: Ethan Ward, the mysterious billionaire, founder of Ward Industries, a company that produced medical equipment and, ironically, had thrived during the same financial collapse that ruined families like hers. But hunger leaves no room for pride. Claire climbed the steps, heart pounding in despair, and rang the bell. The sound echoed like a cry into the void. For long seconds, nothing. Then, the door opened. He was there. Tall, composed, eyes of cutting blue. Ethan Ward's face was a sculpture of contained pain, but what froze him wasn't the misery standing before him, it was her face. For an instant, time broke. Ethan's eyes widened, and he stumbled back a step. My God, he murmured. It can't be. Claire trembled and lowered her gaze. I just wanted to clean your house for a plate of food, sir. That's all. Ethan didn't respond. He only stared, as if seeing a ghost. The memory of Lydia, his wife who'd died 3 years earlier in a car accident, crossed his mind, and the resemblance was impossible to ignore. The same eyes, the same tone of voice, the same tremor of vulnerability. He stepped back, trying to compose himself. Come in, he said, his tone dry. But just for tonight. Claire stepped inside, unaware that that single step would change both their destinies. The interior of the mansion felt like another world. The warmth of the heater embraced her, and the faint scent of wood and freshly brewed coffee made her eyes well up. She looked around, astonished by the grandeur, the expensive paintings, the grand piano, the framed photographs of a smiling woman on the walls. The woman in the photo was her daughter, or almost. The same smile, the same honey-colored hair. Claire turned, confused. Who is she? She asked, her voice hesitant. Ethan looked away. My wife, he said shortly. She died 3 years ago. The silence that followed was heavy. Claire simply nodded, embarrassed. I'm sorry. He didn't reply. Instead, he picked up the phone and called Mrs. Hanley, the housekeeper, an elderly, kind woman who, upon seeing Claire, raised her eyebrows in a mix of surprise and disapproval. She can sleep in the back room, Ethan ordered. And give her something to eat. Mrs. Hanley sighed but obeyed. I in the kitchen. She served Claire a simple plate, hot soup and bread. Claire ate slowly, savoring every spoonful as if it were molten gold. Mrs. Hanley watched her, and gradually, her stern gaze softened. You look exhausted, dear. How long has it been since you've eaten properly? A few days, maybe a week. My goodness. When she finished, Claire was led to a small guest room. The mattress felt like heaven, but before falling asleep, she heard Ethan's voice from the hallway, low and firm. No questions. She leaves in the morning. Claire curled up, her chest tight. Even so, for the first time in months, she fell asleep warm. At dawn, she woke before the sun. The guilt of staying there without working gnawed at her, so she went down to the kitchen and began cleaning. She scrubbed the counters, swept the floor, organized the dishes, until a voice startled her from behind. "I didn't ask you to do that." She turned, frightened. Ethan stood in the doorway, wearing a black t-shirt and an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank you for the night." He studied her for a moment. Something about her disarmed him, her humility, her lightness even in misery. Without knowing why, he said, "If you really want to thank me, you can stay a few more days. I have a house far too big for one person." Claire's eyes lit up. "I can clean, cook, whatever you want, sir." "Ethan," he corrected. "Call me Ethan." The following days changed the air of the house. Claire cleaned each room with care, and little by little, the mansion, once cold and silent, began to feel alive again. She hummed softly while arranging flowers, and even Mrs. Hanley started to smile more often. Ethan, however, found himself disturbed. He watched Claire through the windows, trying to understand why he kept feeling that constant déjà vu. One afternoon, he went into his study and opened an old box of Lydia's keepsakes. Among photos and letters, he found something that made his blood run cold, an old picture of Lydia, before their marriage, holding a baby in her arms. On the back, scrawled words, "For Claire, my little star. One day, we'll meet again." Ethan went pale. "Claire," he murmured. "No, it can't be the same person." That night, the snow returned. Claire was in the kitchen preparing tea when Ethan entered, tense, eyes dark. "I need to ask you something," he said, approaching slowly. "Of course. Did you have a family? Siblings? Anyone named Lydia?" Her heart raced. "Lydia," she whispered. "My mother's name was Lydia. But she left me at a shelter when I was little. I never saw her again." Ethan felt the floor vanish beneath his feet. Everything suddenly made sense, and at the same time, nothing did. She wasn't just similar, she was the daughter of the woman he had loved. And for the first time, the billionaire who lived imprisoned in his own grief felt something new: fear. The storm battered the windows as if to remind them that the world outside was still harsh. Inside the mansion, a different kind of silence lingered, not the sterile emptiness of before, but an attentive stillness, as though the walls themselves were breathing with their inhabitants. Ethan avoided mentioning what he'd heard. The name Lydia hung between them like a lit candle in a dark room. Claire, sensing she had touched a wound, moved through the house more cautiously, stepping softly as if on fragile snow. The next morning, she woke early and made pancakes. The smell of melted butter and maple syrup drifted down the hall and met Ethan just as he was leaving his office, tie undone and eyes shadowed with fatigue. He stopped at the kitchen door, surprised. "You cook like this every day?" "Only when I have something to cook with." She smiled. "Today we do. I rarely eat breakfast." "Well, today you will." He sat, still unsettled by her casual tone. Claire served a generous portion, remaining on her feet, as if it were too presumptuous to sit at his table. Ethan gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit. I'm not a king." She obeyed with a shy smile. "Thank you for letting me stay." "I said a few days. That still stands." Claire looked down at her hands. "And about what I asked yesterday. I didn't mean to be invasive." You weren't. I'm just not used to it. He chewed in silence. He could tell her everything, that he'd been married to Lydia, that she had died, and that maybe Claire. But something stopped him. The certainty was too fragile to lean on. And there was another thing, a fear that, by revealing it, he might lose himself to the past again. Have you ever thought about looking for this, Lydia? He asked carefully. I have. Claire took a deep breath. But I had nowhere to start. I never knew her last name. The shelter said she left me with a blanket and an unreadable note. And your son? The question slipped out. Claire's hand went straight to her heart, instinctively. Oliver. He's 4. He's with a temporary family. They're waiting for me to have a fixed address, a job, or at least prove that I can support him. You will. Will I? Her eyes shone with a fragile brightness that disarmed him. Because sometimes it feels like my whole life is just one long hallway with no doors. Ethan met her gaze. Maybe you just haven't found the right key. She gave a dry laugh. And where do you find a key like that? Sometimes, we make it ourselves. The phrase lingered between them. Claire kept serving, but something in Ethan's posture had softened. A small crack in the ice. Days passed in a new rhythm. Claire swept, dusted, aligned books, washed sheets and organized the office with an efficiency that even surprised Mrs. Hanley. By late afternoon, she sometimes dared to play a few notes on the grand piano, hesitant, by ear, recalling the days at the orphanage when a volunteer had let the children touch the keys. One evening, Ethan found her there. He stood at the doorway, listening quietly. The melody was simple but pure, an attempt to remember who she was. He approached softly. When Claire noticed his shadow, she froze. I'm sorry, I shouldn't keep playing, he said, surprising them both. What song is that? I don't know the name. I just know that when I play it, I don't feel so alone. Ethan sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. His fingers touched a few tentative notes. Lydia loved the piano, he confessed softly, as if letting a secret slip from his chest. She used to say certain notes are like forgiveness. Claire looked at him. Forgiveness from whom? From ourselves. They sat in silence, hands resting on the keys, until Claire played a short phrase, and without thinking, Ethan completed it. The melody became dialogue. For long minutes, they spoke through sound, as if inventing a language only they could understand. When they stopped, the hall clock chimed 6 times. Claire sighed and stood up. Thank you for that. I should be the one thanking you. That night, before bed, Ethan returned to the box of memories. He pulled out another photo, Lydia and him at a hospital opening, the Ward Industries logo gleaming behind them. Lydia smiled, but behind that smile was a shadow. Around that same time, lawsuits had begun surfacing. Deals with shady suppliers, harsh outsourcing, invisible ruin falling over smaller partners, people like the family that had rented Claire's apartment, evicted without notice. Ethan closed his eyes. He wasn't the villain the headlines painted him to be, he told himself. Just a businessman who'd grown too fast, outsourced too much, trusted the wrong person. Miles Kerr, his ambitious and efficient CFO, but the truth stone, whoever signs, bears responsibility. And what if the very contracts that destroyed Claire's life had come from his own desk? That weight kept him awake. Claire's gentle, wounded presence was a mirror, one that showed him the cost of every number he'd ever approved. If she ever discovered that her misfortune bore his fingerprints, everything would crumble. The next day, Claire was organizing the office when she found a gray folder without a label. It was old, worn with time. When she opened it, she saw newspaper clippings about Lydia, community piano recitals, donation drives, charity events. In the middle, a small hidden article: young mother abandons baby at orphanage and disappears. No photo, just a line: the woman allegedly left an unreadable note and a blanket embroidered with a star. Claire's throat closed. She reached into her worn handbag, her only treasure, and pulled out a small blanket, embroidered with a star. "Ethan?" she called, voice trembling. He appeared in the doorway, breathless, as if he already knew. "Where did you find that?" "Here." She showed him the clipping. "Why would you keep this?" They looked at each other. The moment stretched thin, suspended. "Lydia was my wife," he said finally. "I didn't know about this article. That folder, she must have kept it herself. Before she died." Claire closed the folder, breathing unevenly. "My mother's name was Lydia. But what if it's not the same one? It's a common name. You have the blanket. That could be a coincidence. Maybe." He nodded carefully. "I don't want to force a story onto your life. I just need to understand too." Tears filled Claire's eyes. "If she was your wife, why did she leave me?" "Claire, I spent my whole life searching for a name, a face. If it was her, why did she leave?" Ethan wanted to answer, but couldn't. He didn't know. He had never met the Lydia from before, the young woman who might have been scared and overwhelmed by choices bigger than her own youth. Silence filled the room again. "I'll find out," he said firmly. "If you'll let me." "Why?" "Because you're under my roof. And because I feel like I owe you something I can't name." She exhaled, wiping the tears. "All right." That night, in the kitchen, Mrs. Hanley washed dishes with more noise than necessary. "He wasn't like this before," she muttered unprovoked. "Like what?" Claire dried a plate. "Curious, kind," said the housekeeper, pursing her lips. "Since Mrs. Lydia died, Mr. Ethan turned to stone. I don't know what you did, but keep doing it." "Me?" Claire laughed softly. "I just clean and try not to get in the way. Sometimes, that's exactly what saves a house. The right kind of silence." Claire smiled faintly. "Mrs. Hanley, what do you know about Lydia, before she married?" The woman thought for a moment. "Almost nothing. Miss Lydia avoided talking about her past. She just said she played piano at a community shelter when she was young. And that, sometimes, when she thought about children, her heart would ache." "Children? That's all I know." She turned off the faucet. "But I can tell when a house is about to collapse, or be rebuilt." On Sunday, Ethan broke routine. He entered the kitchen holding 2 thick coats. "Come with me." "Where?" "Downtown Boston. Charity fairs." Lydia used to play there in December. Maybe someone knew her before I did. They walked under the snow, side by side but not touching. Boston's cold cut deep, but there was an honesty in it. People who walked through it showed their resilience. They visited a community center, then a church, then a classroom where an elderly teacher gave music lessons to underprivileged children. Lydia Ward? The teacher repeated. Of course I remember. Before she married, she was just Lydia. Her fingers had a glow. But in her eyes, there was a weight, like someone hiding a winter inside. Did you ever hear anything about a baby she left? Claire asked, her voice tight. The woman sighed. I heard whispers. But I never judged. Sometimes life corners a person, and they choose to keep breathing, even if it hurts someone else. On the way out, Claire slowed her steps. Ethan matched her pace. You all right? I'm trying to be. They stopped at a small square. A street vendor was selling hot chocolate. Ethan bought 2 cups and handed her one. I haven't drunk something this sweet in years. Then make a toast. To what? To keys we make ourselves, he said, repeating his own phrase, and they both smiled faintly. On that park bench, she told him more about Oliver, the smell of his hair, the way he said Mama when sleepy, the laugh that chased away monsters. Ethan listened like a man receiving a mission. Every word she spoke rooted itself deeper in him, along with a fear. If she discovers what my company did, if she hates me, I'll still help her. On Monday, Ethan called his trusted attorney, Ruth Delgado, to meet him at the mansion's office. I need an audit, he said. Old lawsuits, evictions, subcontracted suppliers. I want to know if, for years ago, there was any action from our company connected to a building on Dorchester Avenue, number 214. Ruth raised an eyebrow. That level of detail usually hides a ghost. What are you really looking for? To close a door I might have left open. Or open one you locked, she said dryly, jotting notes. 2 things, this could backfire on you personally. And why now? Ethan hesitated, because it's the right thing to do. Ruth studied him for a long moment. 3 years ago, you would have told me to bury this. Now you want to dig it up. People change. Or they go back to who they were before the pain, she said with a half smile. I'll find everything. As she left, she crossed paths with Claire in the hallway. Ruth gave a professional nod. Claire returned it nervously, clutching a laundry basket. Ethan watched them briefly, 2 different worlds, one sharp and strategic, the other gentle and enduring. That evening, Claire found Ethan on the covered terrace, staring at the city. Boston looks less cruel from up here, she said, distance lies. Maybe. But from here, it's easier to imagine a future. Down there, the noise is scarier. What's your ideal future? Oliver with me. A small place, but big enough for laughter. An honest job. And music. Even if it's just a second-hand keyboard. She shrugged. And you? Silence, he answered immediately, then smiled at the absurdity. And maybe the right kind of noise. Like your house when I play the piano? Like your house when you talk about Oliver. The air between them changed. It wasn't romance, not yet, but something delicate, aware of the grief sitting between them. Ethan moved half a step closer. Claire noticed, inhaled deeply. She didn't step back, but she didn't move forward either. They stood side by side, sharing the cold and an invisible blanket of respect. "If I ever cross a line," he said, eyes ahead, "tell me." "I will," she replied softly but firm. The next morning, Ruth returned with documents. She spread them over the office desk, Dorchester Avenue, 214, old building. Owner, a small company that had financing tied to one of your subcontractors. When that subcontractor collapsed, after your contract cuts, the domino effect was quick. Evictions followed, including that of a young mother and her child. The description matches what you told me. Ethan's stomach sank. Names? The small company was a shell firm, managed by Miles Kerr. The name hit like a punch. "He got a bonus that year," Ethan murmured. "So did you," Ruth replied mercilessly. "But from what I see, he shielded you from the Messier parts. If you want to make amends, there are ways: donations, settlement funds, social programs. But if you personalize this case, you'll be assuming the guilt publicly." "Maybe I should." Ruth looked straight at him. "Who are you trying to make amends to, Ethan? The press? The shareholders? Or someone specific?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. After Ruth left, Ethan remained surrounded by papers that smelled like secrets. He knew what he had to do: tell Claire. He couldn't build anything honest without revealing the abyss beneath. He found her in the music room, dusting the piano. "Claire, I need to show you something." She saw the gravity in his eyes and sat down. Ethan explained. The layers, the outsourcing, the domino effect. He didn't excuse himself. He told her what he'd signed, what he hadn't watched closely, what he'd chosen not to see. With every sentence, he felt something slipping away: respect, trust, maybe the fragile connection that had just begun between them. Claire was silent at first. It wasn't anger, it was processing. Then her face hardened. "So it was you. I was part of it. You were the signature that took my son away." "I didn't know." Knowing or not didn't feed Oliver. Her voice cracked. "I knocked on so many doors, Ethan. Yours too. And you were in here. With heating. With a piano. With photos." He tried to move closer. She stepped back. "I don't want your pity." "It's not pity." "Then what is it?" "The need to make it right. To deserve to breathe the same air as you without it weighing." Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. "I need to go," she said abruptly. "I need to breathe. It's snowing hard. I lived out there. I can handle it." She grabbed her coat and left, the door closing behind her with a soft but devastating sound. Ethan stood frozen for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. "Ruth, I want to create a fund, immediately, for families evicted by our cuts, retroactively. And I need legal guidance to support one specific mother without exposing her. Also, schedule a meeting with Miles Kerr. Today." He hung up and, without thinking, went after Claire. The snow bit into his skin, the wind cut his face. He found her 2 blocks down, sitting on a closed shop step, hunched, clutching the star blanket in her hands. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," he said, breathless. "But I had to make sure you were safe." She didn't look at him. "I don't know what to feel." "Feel at all. I'll stay right here. I won't touch you." They stayed like that for long minutes. The cold was brutal, but in the act of simply staying, not forcing, not defending, something small shifted. "Ethan," she said finally, "if I come back, can I keep the cleaning job for a few more days? Just so I don't lose what little progress I've made with the social worker." "You won't lose anything. I need stability. And you'll have it. Even if you don't want to live under my roof, I'll make sure you have a place. Not out of pity, out of duty. I owe you. Rich men's promises are what put me on the street." "Then don't believe promises. Believe the documents Ruth will put in your hands tomorrow." Claire took a deep breath, tucked the blanket back into her bag, and finally looked at him. "I'll come back tonight. Just don't talk to me." "All right." They walked back together in silence, the snow covering footprints they were still learning to understand. That night, Claire woke to a faint piano sound. She went downstairs quietly. Ethan was playing the same interrupted melody they had created together, except now he stumbled, missed notes, started over. There was honesty in the imperfection. Claire leaned against the doorframe and listened unseen. A thought, small but dangerous, crept in. Maybe people really can change. Maybe I can too. She went back upstairs, hugged her pillow, and cried silently, not only from pain, but from the first spark of something that resembled hope, even on shattered ground. Morning came gray and cold. Ethan hadn't slept. He'd spent the night buried in reports and guilt, rereading old contracts, revisiting forgotten emails. Each line was a web pulling him back into the past. At 7, the intercom rang. "You have a visitor," Mrs. Hanley announced. "The lawyer." Ruth Delgado entered carrying a thick folder. "Everything's ready for your meeting with Kerr?" "Yes." "You're going to face him yourself?" "There's no other way." She looked over her glasses. "You look like a man about to confess a crime." "Maybe I am." "And the girl?" "She's here. Working. Trying not to hate me more than she already does." Ruth sighed. "Ethan, be careful. The past doesn't like to be disturbed." Meanwhile, Claire cleaned the living room. The air in the house was heavy, dense, almost electric. She tried to focus, but the murmur of male voices coming from the office echoed down the hallways. At 10 o'clock, a black car stopped in front of the mansion. Out stepped a tall man in an expensive suit, with the arrogance of someone who'd never known hunger. Miles Kerr. Until now, that name had been nothing more than a signature, a financial ghost. Now it had flesh and cold eyes. Ethan received him in the library. "Miles." "Ethan. Long time. And, may I say, you've changed. A humanitarian now? You could call it that. Or guilty." Ethan remained calm. "Sit. We need to talk about Dorchester Avenue." Miles raised a brow. "Still on that?" It was a necessary cut, a corporate decision. You signed off, remember? I trusted you. You executed. And you profited. We're even. Ruth crossed her arms. Miles, we found evidence you manipulated spreadsheets and hid losses. There are transfers to shell companies under your name. He laughed. Oh, Ethan. So this is it? You're playing the repentant saint and making me your scapegoat? You destroyed lives, Miles. One of them lives here now. Miles looked intrigued. Here? Claire Thompson. She was evicted because of the contracts you cut. Miles let out a dry laugh. My God, Ethan. You brought a beggar into your house? You're worse than I thought. The punch came before he finished laughing. Ethan, restrained for years, exploded in one strike. Miles fell onto the desk, papers flying. Ruth shouted. Enough, she intervened. Do you want justice or a scandal? Ethan was breathing hard, hands trembling. You'll return every cent, Miles. Every one. Or I swear I'll destroy everything you have. You won't do anything without destroying yourself too. So be it. Miles stood, wiping blood from his lip. You've lost your edge, Ethan. That's what made you powerful. Now you're just another man trying to redeem himself with tears. Good luck with that. He left, laughing. Ruth watched him go. That didn't end well. No, Ethan replied, running a hand over his face. But it started. Hours later, Claire was finishing up in the garden when she heard the sound of Miles's car driving away. Through the window, she saw Ethan leaning against the wall, exhausted, while Ruth gathered the scattered papers. When she entered the room, Ethan looked up. He's gone. That was him? Yes. The one who made you sign? The one who convinced me that profit and ethics could live on separate lines. Claire studied him for a moment. And now? Now I try to stitch those lines back together. She hesitated, then asked, Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing all this? Not just for me. For him, for the company, for someone who's already gone. Why? Ethan drew a long breath. Because I'm tired of being the man Lydia wouldn't recognize. Claire looked at him, touched and confused. She loved you, didn't she? Yes. But she also hid something. And I think that something is you. That night, Ruth called. I found something. An old document under the name Lydia Ward. An anonymous donation to a children's shelter, dated 1998. The amount covered the expenses of a little girl named Claire. The donor was Lydia herself. Ethan went silent. Ruth continued, her voice softer now. She loved you, Ethan. But it seems she loved that child even before she met you. He hung up, thunderstruck. Then he ran to the music room, where Claire was putting away sheet music. Claire, your mother never forgot you. She looked up, startled. What do you mean? She kept you alive. She sent money to the shelter. Protected you without anyone knowing. The tears came before words could. So, she loved me? More than anything. And now, you're here. In the very place where she loved and was loved. Claire collapsed onto the piano bench, trembling, Ethan knelt before her, not touching her, just present. I can't give time back, Claire. But I can take care of what it left behind. She looked up. And what if I don't want care? What if I just want truth? Then I'll give you all of it. The next day, a local newspaper headline read, Ethan Ward announces reparations fund for families affected by corporate failures. The media stormed in. The stock plummeted. The board demanded answers, but Ethan was strangely calm. When Ruth called him crazy, he simply said, "Sometimes ruin is the only way to rebuild." Claire watched the press conference on the kitchen TV. She saw a different man, vulnerable, honest, weary. And for the first time, she believed forgiveness might be more than a pretty word. That night, Ethan returned from the conference and found Claire in the living room. She held the star blanket in her hands. "Can I show you something?" she asked. "Of course." She opened a seam in the blanket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper sewn inside. It was the original note, "For my daughter, my star. Forgive me. One day you'll understand. L." Ethan closed his eyes, swallowing tears. "She called you that, my star." Claire smiled through her tears. "Maybe the universe has a strange sense of humor. Or mercy," he whispered. They sat in silence, side by side. The house, for the first time, felt at peace, but destiny still had one last turn, the biggest of all. The next morning, Ruth showed up pale. "Ethan, we have a problem. Miles Kerr is dead." The silence that followed was absolute. "What do you mean?" "Car accident. But the preliminary report suggests sabotage. And your name was mentioned." He sent a message minutes before it happened. Ethan felt the ground open beneath him. What did he say? Ruth looked from Claire to Ethan. "If I go down, he goes with me." Snow had started to fall again. The city seemed suspended, like winter itself was holding its breath. Inside the Ward mansion, the silence turned tense, electric. Ethan paced in circles in his study, phone in hand. Ruth's voice came through, steady and firm. "The police want to question you." Miles sent a voice message before the crash. "They're treating it as suspicious death." I didn't even speak to him after he left here." "I know. But he recorded a message saying, 'If anything happens to me, it was Ethan Ward who ordered it.'" Ethan shut his eyes. That old feeling of collapse returned. Everything he was trying to rebuild was slipping away again. "Ruth, I didn't do this." "Then prove it." "How?" "With her." "Claire?" "Yes. She's seen who you really are. She might be the only one who can still hear you without all the noise." Ethan took a deep breath. For the first time, the strength holding him up came from fear, not of losing money, but of losing the one person who still saw him with hope. In the kitchen, Claire was folding towels when the news broke. Miles Kerr, former executive of Ward Industries, found dead in his car. Police investigate possible mechanical sabotage. Ethan Ward, ex-partner, mentioned in a voice message. Her blood turned to ice. Mrs. Hanley turned off the TV slowly, without meeting her eyes. "Sometimes the past refuses to die quietly," she said. Moments later, Ethan entered, pale. "You've seen it. It's on every channel." "It wasn't me." "I want to believe that." "Then come with me." I want to show you something. They went to the music studio. On top of the piano, Ethan laid out a folder. These are company records, transactions Miles hid, emails, proof he'd been siphoning money for years. I was going to turn them in tomorrow. Claire flipped through the papers, her hands trembling. And now, he's dead. Yes. And the evidence was in your house. Yes. Oh God, Ethan. He stepped closer. Look at me. I swear on everything I've lost, I didn't touch a hair on his head. But what's happening? It's bigger than both of us. I think Lydia was his victim too. Claire's eyes widened. What are you saying? Ethan showed her an old photo, Lydia behind the wheel of a car. The accident report was a mess. Ruth found hidden files. Her car had the same brake failure that Miles's car had. The air left Claire's lungs. You're saying my mother was murdered? All evidence points that way. Miles had motive. She was about to expose corruption in the company. He silenced her. And now, when I tried to do the same, he was silenced too, Claire finished, voice trembling. They looked at each other. Suddenly, they were no longer victim and culprit, but two souls cornered by the same ghost. In the following days, the headlines were relentless: billionaire under suspicion. Web of corruption and death entangles Ward Industries. Police took Ethan for questioning. Claire watched him leave in handcuffs, his eyes steady, offering no resistance. From the porch, she felt something new, not anger, but determination. If he's telling the truth, he won't fall alone. Claire spent the next few days combing through the mansion. She found old donation records, Lydia's letters, notes scribbled in faded diaries. In one, dated a few months before her death, a line pierced her heart. The truth always finds a way, even buried under snow. That sentence became her compass. With Ruth's help, Claire tracked down an old company mechanic, Derek Moore, a nervous man in his 50s. I don't want to get involved in this, he said. It's about Lydia Ward. And Miles Kerr. At the mention of Miles, the man went pale. He ordered us to replace parts in the test cars, said it was to cut costs. But the brakes failed. You signed those reports? I was forced to. Then they paid me to stay quiet. Claire recorded everything. When she stepped outside, the cold wind hit her face, but for the first time, she felt warmth inside. That night, she went to the prison. Ethan was sitting, exhausted, unshaven. When he saw her, his eyes filled. Claire, shoo. I came to show you something. She placed the phone on the table and pressed play. Derek's voice filled the small room. When it ended, Ethan bowed his head. You did this? We did, she corrected. Why? Because you taught me. Sometimes, we make our own key. He smiled for the first time in days. You saved me. No. The truth did. Days later, the case went public. The recording spread like wildfire, clearing Ethan's name and exposing the entire web of corruption Miles had built. Lydia Ward's name was restored, recognized as the original whistleblower, and Claire became the symbol of the courage and justice Lydia had always dreamed of. But destiny still had one last chapter. When Ethan was released, Claire was waiting outside. The sun, timid, broke through the white of the snow. She held a letter in her hand. What's that? It came today. Addressed to you, but written 20 years ago. It was found in a shelter's safe. Ethan opened it. The handwriting was Lydia's. If our lives ever cross again, take care of her as you would of me. She will be your redemption." Ethan looked up. Claire was crying silently. "She knew," he whispered. "She did." She stepped forward and hugged him, not a romantic hug, but one of peace. Two stories finally resting. Two ghosts forgiving each other. Snow began to fall again, softly, as if the sky itself was cleansing the ground. Ethan sold part of the company and founded the Lydia Institute, a foundation providing shelter, food, and work for single mothers. Claire became its director, and months later, she regained custody of Oliver. One night, while her son slept, she sat at the foundation's piano. She played the same melody as before, and deep down, she felt someone playing along. Maybe it was just memory. Or maybe it was Lydia, smiling between the notes. Spring came. Boston looked like a new city, as if it had been given a new pair of lungs. In the former ballroom of the Ward Mansion, now bright, open, and full of life, a banner read, "Grand Opening, Lydia Institute, Home, Food, Work, Music." Ethan, without a tie, watched quietly. The house that once held silence was now full of sound, laughter, clattering pots, children's footsteps, and the gentle tuning of a piano. Outside, a small park had just been built, full of running children inventing the wind again. Claire crossed the hall carrying a clipboard and little Oliver on her hip, sleepy and tousle-haired. She gave instructions, signed forms, received hugs, heard her name. When she spotted Ethan, she stopped and smiled, a smile that promised nothing but truth. "Ready?" she asked, glancing at the clock. "The recital starts in 5. "Ready," he replied, and for a moment, he just stood there, breathing in the place he no longer owned, but finally belonged to. In the bright auditorium, a digital keyboard stood beside the restored grand piano. On the piano, inside a frame, rested the old blanket with the embroidered star, now clean, unfolded, preserved between two panes of glass. Below it, a small plaque read, "For my daughter, my star." L. The first notes began. They didn't come from a professional, but from a teenage girl who had learned chords only 3 weeks earlier. Her hand trembled, missed, started again. The audience waited kindly. When the melody finally flowed, soft and steady, Claire realized it was the same song she had once played with Ethan. A simple tune that sounded like forgiveness. After the little concert, side doors opened for a communal dinner. People began lining up, then she appeared, a very young woman, coat too thin for the season, holding a child's hand and wearing the last sparks of courage in her eyes. She hesitated at the entrance, approached Claire, and whispered, Can I clean your house for a plate of food?" For a second, the world turned back to yesterday. But yesterday no longer ruled here. Claire smiled, steady and kind. "You don't have to clean anything. Come eat. Then, if you want, we'll find you a room, a warm bath, and a job." She pointed to the sign above the counter, "Food is a right. Work is a bridge. Home is a beginning." Ethan watched the scene with a reverence that looked like prayer. Beside him, Oliver climbed onto a chair and pointed at the piano. "Mommy plays?" "Mommy plays," Claire said, sitting down at the keys. Before she began, she reached into her pocket and placed a small metallic object on the piano, a key engraved with a star, made from the clasp of the old blanket. She set it at the center, right where the heart beats. Ethan understood, sometimes, we make our own key. As the music began, the lights of the auditorium reflected on the glass frame of the blanket. For a brief moment, a glass star seemed to shimmer. It wasn't a miracle, it was life's way of saying thank you. And without fairy tale promises, but with the courage of those who start over, the story found its rest, not because everything was perfect, but because, in that place, hunger had a name, dignity had an address, and guilt had a job. Outside, at nightfall, it snowed lightly. In spring, some swore they saw it. Others laughed. Claire looked up at the sky and whispered, unafraid of speaking to no one, "Thank you, Lydia." The improbable snow melted in the air like a brief blessing. And life went on, always better when there's someone to open the door.